Hey everyone, this is Shobit Chauhan, and I'm a final year student pursuing computer science engineering at Bennett University. And this video is about my 8-week internship at Quadwave Consulting Private Limited, which I completed towards the end of my third year. And so Quadwave provides service to Ampere XP. Ampere XP has its flagship product, which is called Ampere, which is basically a software where you can develop and deploy all sorts of web applications, be it regarding ML, AI, big data, IoT, or just simple web applications. So right now I do not have access to the website as I have completed my internship. Uh, so I'll explain the experience I had over these weeks through the report I made. Right. So Ampere basically, as I explained earlier, is a software where it is a very easy software to use where you can develop even complex web applications with minimal coding or no coding required. So, since Ampere was a new thing for me, uh, the students which I was along in this internship were provided training for the first few weeks. In fact, there was a training session every other day in which they taught us how to get used to the software and taught us how to deploy and develop all sorts of web applications. And this was distributed into different weeks. Every other week we learned something else, and usually it became more and more advanced as we progressed. So week one was just assignments on basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. So we started with a basic form which just took inputs of two numbers and we had to display the sum of those two numbers. So in that way we got familiar about how to go on with Ampere. And this progressed into other weeks, progressive weeks, in which we learned more advanced things like workflows and the form's basic controls, all the basic functionalities. Week 3 and 5 consisted of the advanced training, for example, using sub processes or using process flows as a service, business rules, more functionalities basically. Week 6 was similar. We learned about data flows and how to integrate those data flows and process flows. So I'll go on with the basic explanation on how things get started on Ampere. So every application that we create has a process flow. Each application has a unique process flow. Now, a process flow is basically a blueprint of what your application will look like. And I'll show you a basic, yeah, this. So this is a basic process flow in which there is a start node and an end node, and you go on with it by assigning a task which will make changes in your database, and according to those changes you can send emails to the user updating him or her about the end result, and you end it with an end node. So a simple example of this would be, let's say, making user entries. So if you have created a form which takes in user inputs, and once you hit submit in that form, it makes entries in the database. So all that update happens in real time. Whether you can also delete an entry or add an entry, modify it, whatever you want to do. That's up to the developer to configure. And as the changes are made, certain rules, the criteria meet, and mails are sent accordingly to the user. So this is all automated. All you have to do is configure each and every node. Now this works on Amper's unique drag and drop feature. And once you develop and deploy an application, Amper has this separate page which is called the workspace. And over there you can see if your application works or not. And it does a good job with version controls, because if you have an error somewhere after you modify your application, you can always go back to your previous working application, so it never gets deleted. And one more good thing about this was, even if you have an error, you can easily know where exactly that error is. For example, in this process flow, there is an error, and you can easily find out that it is in the database. So you can check out what the problem is. For example, in this, there's a problem in the queries used, and you can go ahead and make those changes to make it work again. That was a good thing. Well, one unique thing about my internship was that each and every application that I developed, I had full control over it. So I was handling all the back end, the front end, and joining them all together to create this one entity. So I was creating tables in MySQL workbenches. I was fetching the data into the form. I was handling how the form looked, what its functionalities were, and that was a good experience because when you develop projects in colleges, you can only see through it to a certain extent. But when you are working in a corporate workspace, you really learn you really learn about this systematic approach to software engineering, right? You learn to think through the customer's perspective. So the things you wouldn't normally think when you're doing stuff in college, you have to think here. You have to think about user convenience, how easy your application is to use, and how it should look. Even though if a functionality of your application is good, it doesn't mean it'll be used by many users, because if it is complex to use, then there's no point creating it. It won't be successful. So we learned that. Along with that, we learned some new techniques, some good industry practices, for example, basic naming conventions and how they work. And when we move towards the more advanced training of Ampere, we learned about how to reduce the complexities. For example, if you have a node, if you have a process flow which looks like this, and you want to send an email to the end user updating him or her about the status, you don't have to add another node here, like the earlier ones I showed, which is splitting into two more on this database. You just have to add events and SLAs, which is so every node, like I said earlier, has its own configuration, and every node has its SLA and events. So you can just create events here. For example, if I'll give you a certain example. For example, if this task executes successfully and certain conditions are met, you can send a specific type of email to the user, and you don't have to add another node here. For example, in this, after a certain node finishes executing itself successfully, if this rule is met, then you can directly send an email. So you don't have to manually configure it anymore. And this, we learned it towards the end of our training. And we also learned some more stuff relating to the visual aspects. For example, creating charts. So in my scenario, in my assignment, I was assigned to make a chart for every state in India, and I had to show its COVID-19 positive cases in total. So this was it. And last week we were given the problem statement, um, where a finance department member should be able to approve or verify the bill amount which is received from a vendor for specific purchase items. So for to complete this project, I was assigned two more team members, and we had to work together. So all the 7 weeks, we learned something new about Amper, and this project required us to use all the things we had learned, to make this whole entity. So we ended up creating a project. So basically, this is how the project process diagram looks like. Once you enter the details in the form, if the bill amount value is less than the balance PO value, the amount gets deducted from the PO amount, and new information gets updated, and it ends. However, if it isn't, if the bill amount isn't less than the balance PO value, you get a mail which is sent to the senior authority to review the bill, and they can do their stuff from there. So this is how our final application look like. It's a form, and so basically once you select this department, whatever item it is. And by the way, we made manual entries about some specific items in our workbench, and we fetch the data into the form here. So once you select anything from the department, for example, if you select operations, and now you can select the cost code. Before you couldn't, unless you select the department. So once you have done that, you can select the cost code, which in turn activates the PO number. You can select that, and once that is done, You can select the line item, which can be either a laptop or a CPU, anything that we entered in our workbench, and all the information will be shown. So once you hit submit, that means that bill has been approved. An email will go automatically to the user. However, if you do hit cancel, everything gets cancelled over here, and an email is sent accordingly that something is wrong and you need to review the bill. So that was our final project, and that was all this was done during the 8 weeks of these internships. In the end, it was a very valuable experience for me because in these tough times, it was hard to go out there and actually experience how web applications develop and how it takes place. But thanks to the placement cell and the computer science department of Bennett University, I was able to grab this opportunity and learn some new things, which would definitely help me in the future if I do enter the web application field.